we've got better communication, that we're giving elected officials and law enforcement at the local and state level more lead time and more information so they can prepare for these events. And I know that the director has resigned, but I think it's critical to make sure that we go forward with the investigation of the Secret Service, whether she's there or not. And then the last point, I apologize for running over, is that to the Secret Service and to Homeland Security, I know there's going to be a process now to replace her, but that cannot get in the way of us sorting out what happened on that day, and more importantly, what we need to take forward, because we've got other events coming up in the very near future. We got to make sure we take those lessons quickly, and so we can move them forward. And I thank the chair for his deference for giving me a little time to run over there, and I thank you again for taking us up to Butler.
You were making an excellent point, and I didn't want to stop you, Mr. Ivey. I now recognize Mr. Garbarino, the gentleman from New York, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Colonel Paris, there have been conflicting reports about the location of state and local law enforcement. Secret Service Director, I believe, said that, former Secret Service Director said that local police were in the same building that the gunman fired from, while other accounts indicate that local law enforcement was in an adjacent building. Were any Pennsylvania state troopers, state police assigned to the building where the shooting happened?
There were no state troopers, to my knowledge, assigned there, sir.
Do you know if any other local law enforcement were assigned inside that building?
I only know that Butler ESU were assigned. When you say that building, I'm referring to there's a series of buildings there that have covered walkways or second-story walkways that allow you to, it's almost like a pole barn type configuration, a modular type building. But to my knowledge, there were no troopers assigned to that location, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Yoes, as technology has evolved, drones have become widely available to both law enforcement and the general public. For a large event with this level of security, would you normally expect law enforcement to use drones for surveillance and deploy counter-drone technology?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Would you normally expect law enforcement to use drones for surveillance and deploy counter-drone technology?
Well, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I just in my experience at this location is there are a number of elevated locations that should have been secured. There are a lot of ways to secure that. They could be with individuals assigned to it, but certainly an overwatch to be able to get a good visual of those locations is paramount.
So it's been reported that the Secret Service apparently did not use drones for surveillance, but the shooter was able to fly his own drone over the area earlier on the day of the rally and get aerial footage of the site. Do you know if that's true?
I have no direct knowledge.
Were you, okay, so, and do you know if whether or not local, state, Secret Service enforcement was aware of any drone use?
I've heard the news reports, but I have no direct knowledge.
Would you consider this a major security breach?
Absolutely.
Now, it's also been reported, Colonel Paris, that the local law enforcement spotted the shooter outside the AGR building and on its roof minutes prior to the shooting. Did local police alert the Secret Service that the gunman was on or around the AGR building roof? Do you know?
So this goes to my earlier qualifier about the timeline, but my understanding of the sequence of events is that he was determined to be suspicious as a result of behavior that he was exhibiting, milling around that area in front of the AGR building. There was a text thread that was going, I've been briefed, between the ESU members. They identified, they took a photo of him. At some point when he utilized the rangefinder, the suspicion was heightened. So I know at a certain point in the command post, a member of PSP received a phone call and a text message from members of ESU, and I know from an interview that that was immediately relayed in the command post to the Secret Service.
And what happened? Yeah. So that was my next question. So what happened? What actions were taken after it was relayed to Secret Service?
So when the PSP member received that information and verbally turned right around, gave it to the Secret Service, our member was provided with a number to which the picture that had been taken by the Butler ESU members, or that was on that group thread, to which that should be sent. Our member did that, and our understanding was that was some element of the Secret Service.
So this was all reported Yeah, this was all reported to Secret Service, and they gave him, Secret Service then sent him back, one of your officers, a number back to send the information back to? Is that what you just said?
That's my understanding.
When did that happen?
Again, the actual timeline, I'm very remiss because I know these timelines need to be hammered out exactly to, I would say, that the overall timeline is about an hour before is when he became suspicious to ESU. What I want to say is, if we know that former President Trump was shot at 11 hours, it was probably in the vicinity of 25 to 30 minutes, but I want to make sure that's a very...
So it was before he went on to speak?
But at that point, just to be clear, he was determined to be suspicious. There was no information that he possessed a weapon. He was outside of that building where the ESU was posted. They were being vigilant. It's, I think, relevant that there were other people at the venue who were suspicious and reported likewise in a close temporal nexus to that as well.
But just to confirm, the Secret Service had this information that there was a suspicious individual. He had used a rangefinder, which made him even more suspicious. And this was all reported to them prior to the President Trump being allowed on the stage to speak?
I believe, again, I'll defer to when the president came out. I know that that was probably 20 to 25 minutes before 11 hours. And steps were taken by the municipal officers over in that area they were actively looking for crooks. You saw the building yesterday. That's a pretty wide footprint. They began looking for him. There were scores of people making their way across that facility. Again, just for some context, there were over 100 people that day that necessitated or were requiring medical attention due to the heat. There was a missing 6-year-old. This individual was deemed to be suspicious because he was walking around and not moving into the venue. The rangefinder obviously heightened that, and they were attempting to locate him as people were moving across that space who were attending the event to the secure perimeter.
Was he the only one determined to be suspicious that day?
The gentleman needs to wrap it up, and perhaps somebody else will yield to you or me
I yield back.
on this topic. I recognize Mr. Goldman now for 5 minutes.
Or we'll just pick up the questioning here.
That sounds great, prosecutor.
First, I do want to mention how sad it is to see Sheila Jackson Lee's empty seat there. What an incredible inspiration to so many of us, and a member and advocate, community presence, and we really are sorry to miss her. She would be very eager to be asking questions here today because there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I sat through a 4.5-hour hearing yesterday with the director of the Secret Service, and we got no information. So I'm going to jump on, piggyback off of Mr. Garbarino. Where you left off is that you relayed, or PSP relayed the photograph to the number that the Secret Service directed your officer to. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, did anything come back, any instructions, directions come back from the Secret Service?
So again, that is left to the after action. We're trying to come up with a sequence of events that led to crooks on top of the building where he ultimately took the shots. So
right, but you said, I'm trying to find, I don't need the specific timeline. I'm trying to just figure out the sequence, because you said that many of your officers or Butler ESU officers were looking for crooks. That was after that photograph was relayed to the Secret Service?
My understanding was after the photo was relayed to our trooper in the command post, and yes, Crooks was in that area around the building. My understanding is 2 additional municipal officers who were on a different post responded to that area, and they began actively looking for Crooks. They circumscribed the building to try and locate him. It became apparent at some point that he was up on the roof. Those 2 municipal officers who responded then, to their credit, actively, once they realized that he was on the roof, one boosted the other one up. hanging from the ledge of the roof. By the time that officer was boosted up on top of the roof, Crooks was on it, almost in that final position that you saw. He had the AR out, and he pointed it at the municipal officer who, suspended from the roof, was not in a position, feet dangling at that point, to draw a weapon or continue hoisting himself back up on the roof. He drops back down from the roof, and at this point, I believe that's when the video that's been widely circulated with people filming Crooks up on the roof, saying there's somebody up on the roof. There were other law enforcement around the building running, but their vantage point on the ground did not lend a clear line of sight to where Crooks did not lend a clear line of sight to where Crooks was at the top of that building. One of our troopers on roving patrol also was notified. That word went out, and he responded about the time that the municipal officer was boosting the other officer up onto the roof.
What was he notified of?
I don't know specifically. That's going to be part of the after action. But we obviously knew that he was, Crooks was suspicious. He had not gone into the venue, and they were actively doing everything they could to try and locate him.
So the local officers who were outside of the perimeter in charge of securing the outside perimeter area, one way or another understood or got direction that they needed to try to find Crooks, presumably to ask him questions, interview him. Is that what the protocol is?
Clear about, I don't want to speak for I haven't seen the Secret Service operations plan, what their responsibilities were and what their understanding of those were from the Secret Service. I don't want to comment on it.
But somehow they got the message.
Somehow
that
there
they
was
knew.
information that he was suspicious. By the time that municipal officer was hoisted up onto the roof and saw him, he had the weapon out.
Do you know how long it was between the time that the photograph was relayed to the Secret Service and the time when the officer was trying to hoist himself onto the roof?
So that's a critical,
Yes.
detailed, salient question. I would answer it from the reverse time period, from if the first shots rang out at 11 hours. The hoisting up of the officer occurred probably no more. Again, I'm going to give you a time, but I want to just put it in
We
the
understand
context
it's
of
not specific.
Of a sequence of events. I would say at most 2.5 to 3 minutes before that first shot rang
And
out.
when
What they were notified in the interim still remains under investigation.
Right. And when he fell off of he let go?
The municipal officer, when the briefing that I had was the municipal officer saw Crooks saw him, and Crooks turned and leveled the gun at him in a position tactically of extreme disadvantage, suspended, in the air with your legs dangling after somebody had boosted you up.
And he let go, right?
He let go and he fell back down.
And was there at that point any communications that there's a shooter on the roof from the municipal officers who were
At that
there?
point, that's all part of the after action. We're just trying to get a sequence of events up to the point when Crooks then fired the weapon. So that's been the focus of our investigation thus far.
But there was at least, you said you thought 2.5 to 3 minutes between the time when the municipal officers tried to hoist on top of the roof, Crooks pointed the gun at them, they dropped, and then between that time and when he fired the shots.
I don't want to give you an exact period of time, but it was minutes. It was a very short period of time, even for his ability.
But not seconds.
I would say minutes, but I would be remiss if I gave you, and I want to be very clear on the record. When you do an investigation like this, the timeline is critical. You're asking me, I was briefed, I'm answering to the best of my ability right now.
And I know my time is up. Colonel Paris, I want to thank you for providing us with this information. It was incredibly disappointing that the director of the Secret Service did not provide any of this information yesterday. I think it is good that we're going to have somebody new at the top, but just having somebody new does not answer the questions. And
Couldn't agree more.
Mr. Chairman, I know you are working diligently to try to get witnesses here. This is not an academic exercise. This is not something that the American people can wait 60 days for. With these gaps in information, there are conspiracy theories, there is disinformation, and all of our safety is at risk, political violence is escalated, and we need to know these answers. I thank you for bringing these witnesses here, and I yield.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the tag team between two sides to get to the details on this, because this is poignant, very poignant. I now recognize Ms. Green for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Paris, I'd like to carry the dialogue on about the specific timeline. I have a timeline that was given to us on the Oversight Committee yesterday when we questioned former Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle, as she has resigned today. But the timeline that I'd like to talk to you about is exactly what you were just discussing here. 18 minutes before President Trump took the stage, it was at 5:45 that the Butler County Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof, took a picture, and reported it. You stated just a few minutes before in your testimony that police or PSP were given a phone number to the Secret Service, and that Butler County Emergency Services texted or sent the picture. Was that a text? Was that a digital platform? Was it an email? How did they send the picture?
So just to be clear, at that period of time, at 18:45, I don't believe the testimony was
5:45 p.m.
5:45 p.m. Yes, ma'am. He was not up on the roof at that point, is my belief.
No. Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof. This is the timeline that we have. Took a picture and reported it. Who did they send that picture to?
Just to be clear, they were posted in the AGR building and took a picture of him. That's what you're.
Yes. Who did they send the picture to?
So I only know from interviews what I can confirm to my knowledge and belief here today that a member of Pennsylvania State Police inside of the command post received that information telephonically and by text, related to the Secret Service, and then was given a number to follow up on. And that was based, again, heightened suspicion.
How did they relay it to Secret Service?
I believe that they verbally turned and said in the command post, this is information that I just received. And then in follow-up to that, as directed from the interview that I was briefed on, that was forwarded by text as requested by the Secret Service.
Can you give us copies of that communication and that phone number that was given to them for Secret Service?
So that's part of the ongoing investigation, and I would defer to the legality of.
Can you find that information and provide it to our committee?
I will look to see if legally I will consult Chief Counsel within the State Police, but it is an ongoing criminal investigation at this point.
So after it was reported, President Trump took the stage at 6:03 p.m. All of this took place. This was 18 minutes before President Trump actually took the stage at 6:03 p.m. President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. This has all been reported, these timelines. Why do you not have a timeline?
Because it's not the timeline is going to be critical for the after-action report. Obviously, we're conducting an investigation with the FBI. We have been deferential to the FBI in terms of what has been released to the media. I was present for one press briefing on the night of Saturday night, July 13th, and we've been deferential to the FBI on that. So I would refer you to the FBI. The timelines that you're quoting, I just want to be clear on the record. To my knowledge and belief, I don't have a minute-by-minute timeline. I've had multiple briefings about what these interviews have gleaned, but they're from the perspective of PSP investigating the homicide and the 2 attempted homicides.
Thank you, Colonel. During the event, at what point in the day was someone from your team first made aware that there was a potential suspicious person or possible threat?
So based on my knowledge and belief, that information relayed to the command post from Butler ESU, in terms of Crooks, was the first time that I'm aware of. Again, keeping in mind, I've heard estimates that there were 13,000 people there. There were multiple people identified as suspicious, several that were identified in that area.
Yes, thank you. Now, you stated before in your questions that you haven't seen an operation plan, but didn't your team participate, and why haven't you seen the plan?
So as my answer prior on the record, I've asked for it. The state police has asked for it. We have yet to receive it. And my understanding is that our walkthrough with our commanders and our area commander was to delineate what our responsibilities were, and we endeavored to fulfill responsibilities.
Who was the Secret Service agent in charge of the advance team?
I don't know the name of the agent.
How was PSP supposed to communicate with Secret Service on the advance team?
You mean in the planning leading up to it? So my understanding is, as is typical, we're notified. We were notified by email on July 5th. The meeting on July 8th, Monday, was to get all of those partners together to exchange information, how they could communicate with one another, and then the planning took place from there.
Could you provide our committee a copy of all those communications, Colonel Pierce?
So I will check with our legal counsel. I mean, Pennsylvania has multiple state statutes that cover investigative plans or law enforcement sensitive information.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, one more thing, if I may. Trump's Secret Service protection could be removed under Benny Thompson's proposed legislation. This legislation was introduced while the politically weaponized government was prosecuting former President Donald Trump. This would leave him at risk. I'd also like to state for the record for this committee that over 140 inmates are murdered in prison every single year. This is a dangerous place, prison is, and of course an 8% of violence in prison leads to murder of inmates. This legislation is reckless, and the minority ranking member needs to withdraw this legislation that would lead to the murder of President Trump.
Ladies, time has expired. I now recognize. Well, we're not going to debate.
You think that statement should be made when the ranking member is here so he can at least address it? Thank you.
He made his point earlier about his bill. There's a difference of opinion, I suppose. But we're just, y'all are out. Okay. I now recognize Mr. LaLota for 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Chairman. 10 days ago.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
10 days ago, a 20-year-old with no military or law enforcement training, with no more than about $1,000 worth of equipment, and apparently working alone, thwarted the United States Secret Service, an agency with a $3 billion budget and about 8,000 personnel. In the early phases of this investigation, the Secret Service, it is clear the Secret Service exhibited poor tactics, including substandard two-way communications with state and local PD. They displayed a lack of strategy, including not employing drones to surveil the risks to President Trump and the crowd. And since July 13th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service, evidenced by them not being here today, has avoided accountability by, among other things, avoiding hearings like this. The attempted assassination of former President Trump, the leading candidate for president in 2024, shocked the conscience of nearly every American, regardless of party affiliation. We, the members of the Homeland Security Committee from both sides of the aisle, are here today to ask questions and about those who are in charge that day, to hold the Secret Service accountable, but more importantly, to ensure this never happens again. Chairman, thank you for hosting this hearing. Colonel Paris, you're the Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police Department?
Yes, sir, I am.
And your testimony, sir, is that approximately 25 minutes, and won't hold you to the exacts, but approximately 25 minutes before the first shots were fired, that local law enforcement officers identified Crooks as suspicious?
As suspicious, yes, sir.
And what was it that officers to conclude that Crooks was suspicious?
My understanding was that he was milling about, and he stood out to them because he never made his way to a point of ingress to the venue. In defense of possible hypotheses, could have been waiting for somebody, could have been delayed, but he stood out to them, and they, from their vantage point at the AGR building, identified him as suspicious.
That was 62 minutes prior, as I understand the timeline. That first one, it was 25 minutes prior for the rangefinder.
Thank you, Chairman. And Commissioner, with respect to him being suspicious, were there other folks who were also in the crowd identified as suspicious by law enforcement?
I have been briefed that, yes, there were multiple individuals, which would be consistent with normal operations for a detail like this, that are identified as suspicious.
Can we take that as a single-digit number of other folks?
The number that I was briefed on was single-digit, but I can't say definitively that I was.
What number were you briefed on, Colonel?
Excuse me?
What number were you briefed on?
I believe I was briefed on an additional 3 individuals.
Okay, so Crooks plus 3. My understanding is you had about 30 Pennsylvania State police officers at the time of the rally?
that were assigned to the detail, both responsibilities of the detail, yes, sir.
And were all of them assigned to your area of the perimeter, not the interior where the Secret Service held the most jurisdiction?
I'm confused by your question, sir.
My understanding, and what the committee has been told, is there were two layers of defense of President Trump. One, the interior, which the Secret Service held the most domain over, and two, the exterior perimeter, which had ceded a lot of authorities to state and local. Is that your understanding as well, Colonel?
So I don't want to get convoluted with different perimeters. I'm familiar that there was a VIP seating area up front. When I refer to the secure perimeter, I'm talking about the fencing that goes around the Butler County Farm Show. All of our people were detailed at various locations, decided by the Secret Service, inside of that.
Thanks. That leads me to the next question. If staff can cue up the Eli Crane video at about second number 1 or 2. This is the AGR building. I and several of my colleagues were there yesterday in Butler. Kudos to Mr. Crane for getting this good video. My understanding from your prior testimony is there were 2 officers stationed or assigned, I think was your testimony, to this building?
I'm aware of 2, but I don't want to say, again, not having seen the Secret Service.
And they were assigned, sir?
My understanding is that the Secret Service and Butler ESU had some sort of collaboration, and that was to be covered.
What was their assignment in the building, sir?
I cannot comment. I'd be remiss not
Were they assigned to be in the building?
I can't comment.
What were the qualifications of the people assigned to or around the building? ESU guys, SWAT guys, long guns, good tactics?
They would be, as the name implies, but I defer to their exact training. I'm not aware of it specifically.
But your understanding is, through the duration of the incident, to at least the first shots fired, they were entirely within the building, not on the building, sir?
I don't 100% want to say where they were the entire period.
But you don't have an understanding as to whether they were assigned to be in the building or on top of it?
I don't. I would need to see the Secret Service operations plan.
And would that have been left to the discretion of state and local, or would that have been left to the discretion of the Secret Service? It sounds like you're saying that would have been left to the discretion of the Secret Service.
I would say it's the Secret Service as the lead agency, just like they told us. Here's the post we want you to staff. This is the motorcade we want. I would defer to the Secret Service.
Thanks, Colonel. When in Butler yesterday, we asked the question, why weren't the 2 well-qualified ESU officers on top of the building rather than in it? And what would you say if we were told the explanation is, well, it was a hot day in Butler and there was air conditioning inside the building and not on the building? What would be your reaction to that assertion, Colonel?
I can't respond to it. I have no firsthand knowledge about it.
Was it a hot day in Butler that day?
I believe it was a warm day, yes, sir.
But you have no knowledge of whether or not the Secret Service or anybody else assigned these 2 officers to be in the building and not on it?
No, sir.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields, and we're going to go out of order because Mr. Luttrell has to get to his committee, so you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you pull the video back up, please? Just for clarification, that is the exact point where the shooter was positioned, correct? Looking through that window in proximity to, if you give a range fan, if you was to expose yourself outside that window, is that the shooter's position? No? In relation to that video, where is the shooter's position at? Just further on the left side. And Mr. Paris, can you clarify something? There were ESU agents internal to the building or in proximity to the building and in that location, correct?
I don't know to that specific location, but they were assigned to the AGR building.
And once the call went out that you had a bad actor in, the agents in the building left their position to try to find that individual?
My understanding is he was on the ground moving around the perimeter, and they moved to actively aid in the search along with additional municipal officers who were.
Does it make sense that ESU agents would be positioned inside the windows so they'd have a better vantage point out into where the X is, where the asset is located?
Could you ask that question again, Congressman?
It makes sense to me that the ESU agents would be positioned in these windows, the windows that they're talking about in this building, so they could have better eyes on the asset, the president, instead of internal to the building milling about. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm remiss because I don't know what the conversation was and what the responsibilities delineated.
I think my concern is if we did have agents, let's just speak hypothetically here, if agents were positioned in these windows in order to provide protection for the asset, and then they were released, and I'm assuming they work in pairs, correct? There's only 2 of them, or is there 4 of them in the building? Do we know the answer?
From my briefings, there were 2.
There were 2. But to me, it would make sense that one would stay behind in order to cover the X, or cover the asset, and then one would engage in activity to find the actor that they were trying to identify, correct? I think my concern is the individuals may, and I hate to say this out loud, but if we didn't do due justice and we left that asset exposed because both ESU agents went to look for a bad actor, we just gave the shooter a bowling alley.
I don't know what their responsibilities and their rules of engagement were, not having seen the Secret Service operations plan. And I'm reluctant to speculate at this point, 10 days out, sir. I would rely on the reviews yet to come.
When it comes to Secret Service, talk comms matrix here real quick. When it comes to Secret Service and the local law enforcement, the state law enforcement, I understand that they are housed in the same, is there a common communication channel? And if so, does each agent and each officer that's working the event have, and I'm going to use old terminology, do they have an avalanche call? Do they have a no joy? When they see something that raises the red flag, can any officer radio in, go, no, go? We are not, hold the asset in place. We have somebody that we're looking for. And if they do or if they don't, how many people does that have to go through to get to the right actor in order to say stop?
I don't know.
Okay, we need to figure that out. Because if I'm an ESU agent in this window and I have to radio a person who has to radio somebody, who has to radio somebody else to get to the main person, then to call it, the dishes are done.
I'm aware of 3 radio systems in operation, PSPs, the Secret Service, and Butler counties.
All communicating on different channels.
Technically, yes, but the integration occurs, I can only speak from PSP, our integration occurs by us having somebody inside of the Secret Service command post. Again, for an incident of this magnitude, in theory, the more people you have on the same channel, if there was a medical emergency or lost 6-year-old and everybody keys up at once, it paralyzes your communication.
I understand that, but if there's one specific channel that you can go to call an avalanche and say, which is freeze the asset, I think that would be necessary. Now, you mentioned something earlier. You guys have done about 20 events this year in Pennsylvania. So, and you spoke, it's common. Now, the military folks in this room are going to understand this. The first month of deployment and the last month of deployment are the most dangerous times to be in combat. One, because you get there the first month, you have no idea what's going on, and then you're there and you get common. You get complacent. And before you leave, that last month, situational awareness kind of dies down a little bit, and that's when bad things happen. There's absolutely nothing common in protecting a president, ever. And as we move forward, I don't want that to be a term that we use, because common just got our president, our former president, shot. And if these assets would have been on high alert, and I'm not saying that they weren't, but when things become common, we get complacent.
I've instructed our commanders moving forward, if there is any, my expectation would be that through the collaboration and the planning of these events, you want more people there, you want people voicing issues and everybody operating on the same page in a unified command. But I have instructed our commanders, the ops plans get reviewed prior to this up through our Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Lieutenant Colonel Bivens, seated here behind me today. But as a result of this, if there are any issues that our people see, we are ordering them to flag them, and we'll work collaboratively moving forward for the remainder of the season and moving forward.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. And our witnesses, at any point where we're going to probably go at least another hour here, if you need to take a break, just let me know and just give me the high sign or a thumbs up. Y'all are okay right now, or are you?
Yeah, we can take a break.
Take a break? All right, we'll do 5 minutes and 5 minutes only. The restroom's right down the hallway to your right. Adjourn.
Thank you. I was just having the same thought.
Order. I now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today. I just want to join my colleagues in remembering our colleague, Sheila Jackson Lee. She was incredible at this job. She was brilliant. She was tenacious. She was tough, but she cared about her district, cared about this country, and perhaps the thing was her taking the 5-minute clock as a recommendation as opposed to a hard set time. But to the matter today, I just want to ask Colonel Parris, how many times have you worked with the Secret Service on events like this in Pennsylvania?
So year to date, we're in the low 20s.
So low 20s just this year.
Yes, in an average year, it's about the same number, but given the election year, there's more.
And I'm sorry for not knowing this, but in your entire career, that would make it roughly how many times?
Dozens, I would say.
Okay. And do you find that there's, for each event, despite whether it's in Philadelphia or Butler, a standard process and set of procedures that are followed every single time?
In terms of the planning
The
of it? Or
consistency of the planning of the event?
Yes, I would say there is a consistency of the planning based on my experience, yes.
Not much variation. There is a set plan that the Secret Service administers with its state, county, and local partners.
That's been my experience, yes, sir.
Was there any change or deviation?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I benefit from so many of my colleagues on this committee who served in law enforcement, served in our military. I did not. I want to ask you a question. From the time that a law enforcement officer was hoisted up, was identified by the shooter turns his rifle on him, how long between that encounter and the first shot?
So I'm glad you asked me that question, Congressman. I'd like to clarify. So it was a matter of seconds.
Okay. Because I think earlier it might have been minutes.
Correct, and I appreciate you asking that question and allowing me to clarify it on the record. When I assigned that number, which again, I don't want to get locked into a timeline of 3 minutes before, that's probably a total amount of time that he was on the roof. When the one local officer hoisted the other one up and subsequently falls, releases himself after being faced with that.
Shooter shuffles across the roof, takes his first.
He's already, I believe, close to being in his final position there.
Okay.
And I'm told it's, again, sequence of events, not a timeline based on the prior criteria I laid out, but seconds after that is when the first shots rang out.
That's helpful, and the chairman and I were conferring on that because it would have been there's many failures on that day, but it would have been a critical failure if a gunman had turned his rifle on law enforcement and no one had pulled the president off the stage if it was a matter of minutes, but seconds.
Thank you for allowing me to clarify.
No, of course, and thank you for answering the question. Just going back to the general process that you've seen over your distinguished career, were there any specific challenges that you and your team faced during this event?
None of which I'm aware, to my knowledge. The planning on the PSP side, as per our interface with the Secret Service, was routine.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that in your experience and the standard protocol, a Secret Service engages with its state, county, and local partners. They have a plan. They work with their partners to implement the plan in the lead up to the event and the day of the event. Is there an opportunity for the state, county, and local partners to provide input, given that they have more familiarity with the area? Butler Police, you yourself have more familiarity with the area. Is there an opportunity for you to provide any feedback to the plan that the Secret Service comes to you with?
In my past experience, yes. And in my past experience, I found the Secret Service very open and collaborative. We enjoy a very strong working relationship with them. And again, there's that fine line where the deference is that they're the top comm under a unified command. It's their incident. But certainly we would endeavor to give them any local nuance that would make the planning more successful and more safe.
I appreciate that. One of the things we touched on multiple times today is the multiple lines of communication, 3 different signals that were being used, a command center. In your experience working with the Secrets, have you seen a better implementation of a more streamlined communication setup that allows the different actors the local PD, the county PD, the state police, to directly communicate to the command center, and then once there's a clear chain of command?
I have not. The Secret Service comms is a very complex operation because of the worldwide environment in which they work. I'm in no way an expert in it. I think from the state and local perspective, our job is to try and integrate communications, and it doesn't have to be a super high-tech solution. We have people who can get a message, turn over their shoulder, and report verbally. We have radios that we can exchange, or we have a trooper with a radio assigned to another partner, be that a federal partner or a municipal partner, and those two radio communication systems can interface because of the human interaction.
And I'll wrap up real quickly, Mr. Chair. And it sort of makes sense in a way because you're going to have people doing traffic. They're going to, folks who you mentioned, a child went missing. You could have a firecracker. You could have a multiple number of things that don't need to rise up, which is why some level of siloing makes sense. But we need to look at how we make it a clearer chain of communication to ensure that really important pieces of information, like identifying the shooter on the roof, doesn't get delayed in moving through those channels. So thank you both for appearing today. Thank you both for your service, and thank you, Chair. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Congressman Ezel for his 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, we also want to thank all of you for being here today and for Speaker Johnson for putting together a bipartisan task force to try to, so we can get as much information to find out what happened here. Today's conversations regarding the attempted assassination of former President Trump is a critical one that I pray never happens again. Throughout my law enforcement career, I held many leadership positions, and through those roles, I've coordinated with the White House, advanced teams, state and local law enforcement, and doing some of these very same similar type events. And we have one goal in mind, and that's to keep people safe. Because of a massive failure in communication, President Trump was shot from a little more than a football field away. And because of the failure of former Secret Service leadership, especially the former director, spectators were forced to do what the Secret Service failed to do, and that was protect themselves from bullets. Ultimately, this led to the death of Corey Comparator, who gave his life while bravely shielding his wife and children during this terrible thing. Colonel, thank you for being here today, and I've said from the beginning, if you want answers, you got to talk to the men and women who were on the ground, the law enforcement officers who were out there and who were taking directions and commands from the leadership of Secret Service and various other leaders. You testified that 32 members of PSP were assigned to various roles to assist the Secret Service. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
Your officers were assigned to various roles, but they were not responsible for securing the building or property at AGR. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The former director testified yesterday that the building was outside the Secret Service secured perimeter. Did the U.S. Secret Service leadership direct local or state police that was their job to secure the building? And if so, did they provide any guidance on this?
So as I stated earlier, aside from the briefing that I received about the walkthrough, when the question was raised and the response from the advance team of the Secret Service, the agents on the pre-plan, that was going to be the responsibility of Butler ESU. I have no firsthand knowledge about any interaction between the Secret Service and any other entity, really.
The Secret Service established and managed the primary command post for communications in the office of the Butler Farm Show. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, sir, yes.
Preliminary findings have concluded that communications were siloed and local law enforcement were not in frequent radio contact directly with the Secret Service. Local SWAT and sniper teams were on a separate radio channels from patrol. Colonel, do your radios have the capability to be programmed to be in contact with other agencies? And do you know if the officers on the ground that day had communication capabilities with the Secret Service that was on that duty that day?
You're asking me a very specific question that I would defer to our Bureau of Communication and Information Services. I can get you an answer as to what those specific capabilities were.
Do you know if the Secret Service provided any guidance on combined communications?
I do not. Again, I have not seen their operations plan.
At 5:45 p.m., a local law enforcement sniper observed the suspect with a rangefinder and reported the suspect to command and the U.S. Secret Service. Colonel, how would you have responded to that information?
So again, I certainly wouldn't articulate that at that point, a rangefinder, which could have legal and legitimate use, that is a threat, but it's certainly a highly suspicious activity that should be addressed.
Exactly. Mr. Woes, you testified clear and constant communication is crucial to ensure the security of the protectee, and that local law enforcement should be part of the command post to facilitate real-time information sharing and rapid response to emerging situations. As we all know, separate communications are necessary and effective during a large-scale event like this. There's no way everybody can be on the same channel. You talk over each other, you won't ever get anything done. But there must be some clear understandings through communications at the beginning so that split-second decisions can be made so there won't be a lapse in time and these terrible things happen. Would you like to just say a few words about that?
Sir, there's no doubt when you look at how many people are involved in an operation like this, having everyone on one channel is difficult. But there are people within contained areas, and their ability to be able to communicate as things change across platforms is crucial. In this case, we know that in seconds things unfolded, and in seconds, getting meaningful communication out to people who might be able to act on that communication is vital. So I think there's avenues here. I agree that not everyone should be on the same channel, but there are certain people within certain areas and perimeters that should be having communication or the ability to communicate a little more freer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. D'Esposito, representing the New York law enforcement community as well, for 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Thank you both for your service. On July 13th, we witnessed the Secret Service fail to secure a Pennsylvania field and keep the former president of the United States of America and the Americans that were gathered there safe. While President Trump thankfully survived this horrific attack, Corey Compatore, a volunteer fire chief, a father, and a husband died while shielding his family from the assassin's bullets. Two others, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, were both struck by bullets and are still recovering. The Secret Service failed. Quite frankly, they failed miserably. And Colonel Paris, Mr. Yoes, Mr. Ezel, myself, we could probably combine our law enforcement experience and have no question that there was failures that day. We could probably ask someone who just graduated from a police academy or a veteran with 40 years on the job, and they would agree. So my first question is to Colonel Paris. I know that you mentioned over the last year you've had close to 20 interactions with the Secret Service and visits. During his presidency, Pennsylvania has been the second most visited state by President Biden. If you could go over again, what is your coordination with the Secret Service? What does it normally look like ahead of a visit from the President of the United States?
So I would say the basic timeline is the same. We are notified at some point that there's going to be a visit of a protectee or the president and everybody in between. The venue is ultimately secured, the logistics, and then there's planning at the request of the Secret Service, and our default position is to attempt to partner and give them all the support that we can.
Okay. Now, I know that Mr. Menendez had similar questions, but I just want to reiterate because I think it's critically important. Of the dozens of times that you've dealt with visits from the President of the United States, and I'm sure you've thought about this dozens and dozens of times at this point, and read through emails and thought about different incidents, compared to the incident on July 13th, was there anything different from the way that this was handled?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. So at approximately 5:51 p.m., Pennsylvania State Police notified the Secret Service of a subject with a rangefinder. That was 20 minutes before the gunman shot President Trump and 2 others. This is for either one of you. What should have happened next?
So ideally, I would say that Mr. Crooks could have been encountered and intercepted. That would have been the ideal.
Mr. Yoes?
Well, I have no direct knowledge. I want to make that clear. But I think also you need to assess the threat and determine whether there's a need to withhold the asset from the stage.
So I think we all know what should have happened, right? 20 minutes passed. There was someone who eventually took a shot at a former president of the United States and killed 2 innocent Americans. So we know what did happen. We know what should have happened. What do you say to those that are saying that local law enforcement failed to provide adequate security at this rally?
As I stated earlier, based on everything I know up until day 10, I only am going to comment on the Pennsylvania State Police, and it's my belief as I sit here, based on all the information that I have, that we met or exceeded our expectations for that event. Am I saying that the event was a success? Obviously, it was not, and our hearts go out to those affected.
I will echo the fact that that local law enforcement plays a huge role and must. I don't think the federal agencies have the ability to be, with bandwidth, to be able to have this event without coordinated effort with local law enforcement. To my knowledge, local law enforcement did what their responsibilities and directions were.
And Mr. Yoes, we've corresponded about this prior, but I just want to, in the last 20 seconds I have, the United States Secret Service established and managed the primary command post. Would you agree, Colonel, that in the United States of America, we have a serious issue when it comes to law enforcement and communicating through multiple jurisdictions and agencies at a singular event?
I would say the short answer is it depends, but communications are always a critical piece to any successful operation.
So I agree it does depend, but I do have a concern when some people's lives are on the lines, when we are supposed to be protecting an asset regardless of who it is, but especially someone who was and it was the President of the United States. The fact that law enforcement agencies are communicating at such a critical time via text message is a problem. And it's one that I think this committee and other committees need to take a real hard look at. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Strong for 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I think we all agree that none of us ever wanted to be holding a hearing like this. As we have covered, the Secret Service relies on federal, state, and local partners to coordinate and secure events to ensure the safety of its protectee. As both of you rightly emphasized in your testimony, Secret Service is the ultimate responsible and the final arbiter of any and all security matters affecting their protectee, full stop. Mr. Yoes, you also went on to highlight the importance of mutual respect, trust, and shared commitment in the relationship between Secret Service, the state, and locals. I was pleased to learn that Director Cheatle has tendered her resignation. This is the first time we have seen real accountability from the director following July the 13th. It is my hope the truth will now come. Her lack of leadership following the assassination attempt has not only impeded the ongoing investigation and eroded the public's trust, but it has also the potential to erode the mutual respect and trust that are fundamental to this relationship between the Secret Service and partners they rely on. Colonel Paris, I understand that state and locals were the ones that first alerted the command center of a suspicious individual some 20 minutes before he started shooting. Is that correct?
As I said before, I would agree with the sequence of events, but I don't want to go on the record with the exact time. So that's my understanding of the sequence of events. Yes.
Does the Pennsylvania State Police use a digital radio system, whether it be the P25 or something of that nature?
Yes, we do.
and it has unbelievable technology. I know we've utilized it throughout the state of Alabama, 40 years and as a first responder, to go from UHF, VHF to a digital system changes the ball game. Does the Secret Service also use a digital radio system?
I would have to get you information on that. I don't know, sir.
Okay, so the communication between the agencies, you start looking at it, the communication with a digital radio system, you can change frequencies, you can make a mutual frequency. Every radio you can have hundreds of different frequencies, but as far as you're not sure if they have a digital radio system or if they're using another conventional UHF or VHF frequency or something of that nature.
In answer to the first part, I'm not an expert on radios. I can't render an opinion on what their system is, but the only answer I would provide is my understanding is there are certain encrypted capabilities that the Secret Service has to maintain that may. We had a regular incident, and we were able to set up a patch to communicate across agencies.
Thank you. Colonel Paris, as you just shared, after state and locals identified the shooter as suspicious, they relayed that information to Secret Service and were given a number to send their concerns to. Is this standard operating procedures to be left a phone number to give your information to rather than direct communications through radio?
I don't want to say that it's standard operating procedure, but if it was a system that or a measure that worked to push that information to the people who needed it in the most expeditious means, I wouldn't be averse to going away from standard protocols.
You said that you had done this type of event with other presidents or in your state. In past history, is this how it usually was done?
I can't say that I have had a personal experience about, I've obviously been present when there were suspicious people that came out over the radio and law enforcement was seeking them, but I can't say that I have a frame of reference exactly on point here, sir.
Did the Secret Service provide rules of engagement for state and locals? Did y'all have to authorize a green light for fire, or do you go by your day-to-day activity where
we would go by the policy and regulations and state law that cover the Pennsylvania State Police.
Another thing that stood out to me with a background in emergency medical services is when the president was brought off, you saw his SUV move about 20 feet, and then it sat there. We watched as a lady in a skirt walked in front of the SUV. We watched as other law enforcement, people, spectators, whatever. Did you notice that seemed to be a long time for the president to be sitting for someone that had taken a bullet? Did you think that was a long time?
I would completely defer to the Secret Service.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like the staff to go ahead and play the video that I took at the site yesterday.
All right, guys, I'm up here on the building where the supposed sniper took his shot. It's not that steep at all. We just had a 70-year-old man back here climb up on the roof easily. See that water tower behind me? Had Secret Service or anybody had sniper teams up there, this guy wouldn't have made it 5 feet up this roof. He would have been taken out. Behind me, you see the windows that Secret Service was supposedly in the second floor of this building behind. Makes you wonder why they weren't able to quickly dispatch the individual. And then behind me, back over here where those red roofs are, that's where the—
Can you guys cut it right there, please?
President was giving his speech from. A lot of questions here in Butler.
Cut it. Thank you. All right, Colonel Paris, did you notice when you showed up on site what the tallest structure on the site was?
I can't say at the moment that I arrived that I did, no, sir.
Okay. Now that you've had a chance to go back and look over it, what is the tallest structure on that site?
The water tower, sir.
Absolutely. Colonel, do you know how far the water tower was from the roof where the shooter took his shots?
I do not.
160 yards, sir. Who made the decision, Colonel, not to put a counter-sniper team on the tallest structure by far on the site with 360-degree surveillance? Do you have any idea?
I do not know, sir.
Okay, we'd like to get that answer. Did you see the video that showed me sticking my phone out the second-story window? Did you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, exposing the coverage of the window of the entire roof. Are you aware that local law enforcement and Secret Service had full access to that building in that room?
My understanding is that they did.
Yeah. Why weren't security teams, sir, on site able to spot a 20-year-old kid with zero camouflage crawling up a white roof with an AR-15 that several rally goers were screaming and yelling and pointing out, and they noticed him, and they weren't even there to conduct security. They were there to watch the president. Do you have any idea why the security teams couldn't find that guy?
I do not, sir.
Would the gentleman yield for just a second on that? So just for clarification, it was the ESU guys that were manning those buildings?
Yep.
And they left because of the call of the suspicious person, so they left their post there to go look for him. They're the same individuals who attempted to climb up the building and were scared away by the shooter pointing the gun, right?
I reclaim my time. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just wondering why they weren't able to find him, because even while they were looking, they could have still looked out that window that they had access to. All right, Colonel Paris, I'm just going to say it. Are you aware, sir, that many Americans believe this was very likely not a lone shooter, but a coordinated assassination attempt? Have you been getting those messages from people like I have?
I have not, sir.
You haven't? Well, there's a lot of people in this room that have been getting the same messages. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of Americans are like, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make sense, guys? How could this many things have gone wrong, right? Like the things I pointed out, a 20-year-old kid, got 150 yards of the President of the United States with an AR-15, flew a drone to conduct site surveillance, was spotted with a rangefinder ranging targets, then lost, had advanced explosive devices on him with no military training. Nobody was placed in the most obvious spot to conduct counter-sniper operations. I was a sniper in the SEAL teams, Colonel. As soon as I got out of the SUV and I saw that water tower, I was like, that's exactly where I'd be. Put me right there. So obvious. After partisan attempts to bankrupt him, imprison him for 750 years, and countless depictions as a modern-day Hitler, are you surprised, sir, that a lot of Americans are like, maybe there's more to this story?
I wouldn't begin to speculate about what the American people think, sir.
Colonel, did your team make entry and conduct investigation at the suspect's home prior to this shooting?
Excuse me, sir? I asked that question.
Did your team make entry and conduct any investigation at the suspect's home?
I believe we had people that participated in that securing of it. There were bomb assets that we provided.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 30 more seconds?
Yeah, I'm letting everybody kind of.
Okay.
On the night of. Since then, none.
Did you get any reports from any of your agents of anything fishy at the home?
I was briefed on.
Was there any silverware found in the home or trash?
I have nothing in the briefing that I was given, sir.
Was it extremely clean, almost like a medical lab? Were you given any of those reports?
I was not giving any of those details, sir.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing. Interesting. The last thing I want to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, this is article, opinion from, I believe, the Washington Post by Robert Kagan. A Trump dictatorship is increasingly inevitable. We should stop pretending. This article compares Trump to Caesar and attempts to justify the assassination of President Trump. And I think even though we want to dodge around it and not make this partisan, I think we all know that a lot of this has to do with the rhetoric, the very violent rhetoric that has led up to this. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields, and so ordered on the entry of that into the record. I now recognize Mr. Burkeen for 5 minutes of testimony, or witness questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alexander, would you mind moving that just a little bit forward here so I can... Colonel Paris, can you see that, or am I obstructing your view?
I believe I can see it, sir.
Alexander, would you mind? I'm sorry. Can we shift it just a little bit to your left, Alexander? There we go. Okay. Better?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is a picture I took yesterday on the grounds, looking out of that second-story window that has the corridor that connects the AGR building, the American Glass Research Building, with where the shooter's location And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to point to the shooter's location as we were made aware. From that X is where the shooter was shared with us. His body was found. From this viewpoint, there's some videos that make it look like he's more this direction, but from the perception, it kind of is confusing. But he was more towards that opposite side. This window, second story, it's the second window from the right side. That window has this view where they could clearly, those ESU officers that were stationed, given access by the property owner to that window, could see the shooter had they been stayed in that man position. This is there moving towards the location of President Trump with the red barns back here. His stage was right in front of that. And you can see a window here that is absolutely going to obstruct the view to be able to look to the 20 or 30 different barn structures, the cattle building, the sheep building, the hog building, the rodeo arena by the pond. The many structures, there's 50 buildings within a 500-yard radius of where President Trump was at. So many vulnerabilities. Do you see a problem with that window being in the way of someone being able from this position to be able to take care of the asset?
A casement window would present a tactical concern for full field.
And I understand potentially, this was air conditioning on top of this second-story building wasn't, and so maybe that was a consideration. But ultimately, Secret Service is the one who made the determination of placement or contacting or making sure the plan was in coordination with the property owner for gaining admittance from the property owner for this second-story window. Is that correct? That was Secret Service's plan.
Correct. Ultimately, it's on...
It's on Secret Service for that plan. All right. My question is, if it's their plan, did they not indicate that someone had to stay manned in that location? Because we're being told that when the two officers, local PD, were trying to lift themselves on the opposite side to get a look at the gentleman, and he turns his gun and they dropped off the building, this would have been a perfect opportunity. Someone would be on the radio. They could have taken him out from this location. Did the Secret Service plan not include directives from staying in those positions?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know. All right, here's another question. With the 2 minutes that you said that there was an opportunity from the time that they were hoisted up, looked at the shooter, you're given the responsibility, as this is delegated in the outer perimeter, to secure the area. Why weren't they able to immediately call their supervisor, who would then be authorized to issue a hold on the asset or a get him off the stage call? Why does it have to be, as your testimony says, they took a picture, sent it to Secret Service 20 minutes before the incident of the shooting, and they have to wait for a response? Why is not the line of communication? I understand they're on different radio frequencies. Why were they not empowered to say, if we send something that's suspicious, then state police, local law enforcement, Sheriff's Department, each one, the head official of each one of those departments, if we entrusted them with enough responsibility to secure that environment, then we ought to give them the responsibility to issue a hold call because of something that they see as a threat. Are they empowered to do that, or does it have to all go through Secret Service to issue a hold?
I can only say what I know about the state police operations plan, and I do not know the answer to your question, sir.
So
I do not know the answer. I don't know what the protocol would be to issue the hold order. And just as a point of clarification that I tried to clean up with the congressman from New Jersey before, when the two municipal officers one was hoisted.
Can I jump on that 2 to 3 minutes, because I got limited time here?
Just to make sure that was seconds